You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristodoulou.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristodoulou, and today we're doing our picks for week number 13 of the NFL. We got a lot of games to talk about with, of course, the Bills and Patriots going head-to-head tonight in Foxborough. A lot to dive into, a lot to discuss. So make sure that like button, subscribe button, and comment down below. Who do you think comes out winners and losers in this week's slate of games? We are currently sitting at 111-69. We had a really strong week this past week, going 12-4. Since week number 4, we have hit double-digit predictions, so 10 or more correct picks every single week, except for like a couple of weeks ago. We had a little bit of a hiccup, but I have been crushing the picks this year. My goal for this season was, when I set out, to just get a better record than I had last year, which ended up being 166 and 106, and I definitely think that is doable the way we're trending right now. So here's to another good week of picks, and we'll dive into game number 1 with the Buffalo Bills heading to Foxborough against the New England Patriots. And I've got to say, this was one that I put a lot of thought into, and mainly because there's just so many things about this game that are interesting, with some pretty heavy winds here in the area that I'm living in, not too far away from Foxborough. And then just the fact that you have two teams in the AFC East, playoff implications, Josh Allen dealing with an elbow injury, and the Bills also not having Von Miller for this game, which is a best case scenario situation for the Patriots here, with an offensive line that has been like shaky at best, almost, with like a couple of good games so far this season only. There is a lot to look at and really digest, because is this game a shoo-in like a lot of people thought it was for the Bills going back to like the beginning of this season? I would say maybe not as much, but still a game that I do think Buffalo can come out and win with, despite the fact that, you know, they don't have Von Miller, and no one really knows, unless you're in the Buffalo Bills organization, just what Josh Allen is feeling in that elbow and what exactly he's playing through in the severity. So while I am a little bit worried here, the biggest things for me is just, I don't know if the Patriots are going to be able to keep pace with the Bills, and I know that the Patriots just had a really strong game passing last week against the Vikings, but the Vikings, their pass defense has struggled all year long. Statistically, has not been that great. So for Mac Jones to have his best game against any secondary in the league, or just a pass defense in general, it being the Vikings, a little less surprising in hindsight when you really start to look at the numbers. So I am going to go with the Buffalo Bills winning this game. I believe in their defense a little bit more than I do the Minnesota Vikings defense. And on top of that, while Josh Allen is still hurt, I just think that offense is still too good, and it's going to be tough for the Patriots to match, considering their offense has only been averaging about 21.7 points a game. The Bills are sitting ahead of them by almost a whole other touchdown at 28.1. As much as I would like to pick the Patriots in this one and think like upset mentality, I'm feeling the Bills. I think they get the job done. If I was to take a score pick, I would look something along the lines of like maybe weather included in the idea, because I don't really know how windy it's still going to be. The winds have been strong all day, but it's supposed to die down sometime this afternoon. I'd probably look at like 27 to 21, something within that ballpark. I think the Patriots can keep it within like a possession. I don't know how large of a possession, but I definitely think they can keep the game within a possession, courtesy of the weather, and also a defense that has been pretty good for the majority of this season and has looked strong as of late, despite struggling against the pass last weekend with the Vikings kind of doing their thing with such an elite group of wide receivers. Looking at the next game here, first 1 o'clock game for Sunday, we have ourselves the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta, with the Falcons being home underdogs in this one here. Yes, home underdogs, which is interesting to me because right now, Steelers are dealing with an issue on offense, injuries. Najee Harris dealing with an abdominal or oblique issue, something along those lines. And there is a possibility that he does miss this game. And I think that this Steelers team really ends up hurting if they don't have Najee Harris in this. That is something that I've really looked at here. I also consider the fact that when you just look at in terms of purely points scored a game here, the Steelers are averaging only about 17.5 points a game, whereas the Falcons are sitting almost near 23 a game. That's a whole touchdown almost at that point there. So a little surprising to me that Atlanta is somehow home underdogs in this game here, when I do really feel like I kind of like the Falcons a little bit more. Now, the Falcons are a run-dominant team, and that is what they do best. And the Steelers, their run defense, one of the best in the league. They're 6th in the league in yards per game, allowing only 104 yards per. So if they can't get things going on the ground, yes, I do see a little bit of an issue there for Atlanta, but the Steelers' offense has not really done much for me to really think that they could outscore the Falcons should things get rolling in their favor. I know there's a little bit of question up in the air right now of should we be seeing Desmond Ridder in Atlanta, but right now, I just think with the offensive production that I've seen from both of these teams and a defense that just recently got TJ Watt back, and obviously he's a massive piece over there in Pittsburgh, I do still think that I like the Falcons just by a hair here. This is one of those things where I feel like just because it's home, it gives me that slight little feeling to kind of lean more towards Atlanta. I don't think this game's going to end up being super high scoring because, like I mentioned, I think Pittsburgh does end up slowing down that run game that Atlanta's been really good with so far this season, but I do see Pittsburgh's offense kind of struggling a little bit, albeit against the Falcons defense that's not necessarily too crazy by any means. I mean, they're 25th in the league in points allowed per game. They're 28th and 21st against the pass and run respectively. So there is an opportunity that maybe the Steelers do catch a little bit of fire in this one here, but ultimately I think that the Falcons have an opportunity to get a win here and keep themselves in the running for a really not good NFC South division. I look at the score and think something along the lines of like 21-17 for the Falcons, ending this one off here. For the next game, we are diving into the Bears and the Packers in Chicago. Aaron Rodgers going to play in what he says is his second favorite stadium to play in the NFL, comically enough. This is one that it's really going to come down to just who's playing at quarterback for the Bears. Do I think that there's a possibility the Bears could upset with Justin Fields under center? I definitely do. If there was ever a year for them to upset with Aaron Rodgers still being the quarterback in Green Bay, it would have to be this year. This has been such an upside-down season. This is a game that the Bears could upset in. However, is he going to play? I don't really know. It sounds from what I'm reading very questionable at the moment. And that means, does Trevor Siemian play? I know he's hurt right now dealing with a rib thing. And if he's not playing and we get Nathan Peterman over there in Chicago, well, I can't really back that up and say that Nathan Peterman is going to lead Chicago to a victory over Green Bay. So I'm going to take a safe pick on this one here just because I am going for a good record this season. And I'm going to take the Packers as a safety pick. If Justin Fields plays, I think the game does get really interesting, but right now, I just don't know if even with Trevor Siemian, who, didn't lead necessarily the most effective offense last week, and if he's not playing Nathan Peterman leading the way for a Bears upset, that would be a serious collapse on the Packers' part, and I just don't see something that crazy happening despite how wild this season has been. And I look at the Packers winning this game somewhere along the lines of like 28-10. This is kind of a blowout victory in my opinion. I think that it's going to get a little overwhelming for Chicago offensively. They're not going to be able to move the ball too much, especially again, this is like if Justin Fields isn't playing. And that's kind of what I'm thinking ends up happening here, hence why I'm going with the score. If it's Justin Fields in, it ends up being closer. I could see something along the lines of maybe like 27-20, maybe something like that, 27-24. Maybe it ends up being closer. I do think that there is a good solid chance the Bears have some good fight in them, but if Trevor Siemian or Nathan Peterman's leading the way, I just cannot get behind the Bears in this game. Moving into our next game, we have the Jaguars and the Lions here. This was a toss-up one for me. You got two 4-7 teams, a Detroit Lions team that's 2-4 at home, and then a Jaguars team that is 1-4 in away games this year. Who the heck do you pick when neither of these two teams like to win on the road and at home in their respective area that they're playing in this week? Well, I think I'm going to just jump right out and say that I'm going to go with the Jaguars. And the reason why is mainly due to just injuries along the offensive line of Detroit. The biggest reason they have been so competitive this season has been just how good the offense has been. And they've been able to drop a lot of points and move the ball fairly effectively in a lot of games this year. And with Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow, and Jonah Jackson all listed as questionable, whether you even end up just missing one or two of those guys, it is going to significantly limit what this offense can do in terms of effectiveness. And I just don't really see things going too well and in their favor, especially against a Jaguars team that is coming off of a hot and massive victory over the Baltimore Ravens and are looking to, kind of continue on with that hot streak. I like Jacksonville. I think they get a win somewhere around, let's say, like 21 to 21, do I want to say 21-17? I'll say like something like 21-14. I don't expect a massively high scoring affair, and I do think that offenses struggle a little bit in here. Jacksonville hasn't necessarily been the most explosive, but they've been solid somewhere along those lines. So 21-14 feels like a solid number to stay at. Next game we're looking at is the Jets and the Vikings. Two teams looking pretty good in their respective conferences here. We have the Jets at 7-4 and then the Vikings sitting at 9-2. A game that will be fairly consequential in terms of seeding for both of these teams should they make their way into the playoffs. This is a game that both teams want to come away with the victory in. Now, my biggest question for this game when I'm looking at it here is going to be how the Vikings handle what has been a very dominant four-man rush from the New York Jets. Also, doubling down on the idea that Mike White is still the starter here. Zach Wilson sitting. He's coming off of a really good performance, and you're going up against a Vikings defense that has not necessarily been great against the pass. 32nd in the league in terms of yardage allowed at 276 a game. If there was ever a time for Mike White to potentially steal the job from Zach Wilson or at least really get those conversations flowing, this is the game right here. The Vikings have been a great team offensively. They're explosive. They're able to put up a ton of points, hence the near 24 points a game average that they're sitting at here. But there is this fear in me that I have where, they did not look great against another team that's very good when it comes to defending the pass and rushing the passer in the Dallas Cowboys. I do say that I like the Cowboys front a little bit more, and I think they're more threatening than the Jets, but the Jets are no slouches, and you definitely can't look over them. This is going to be a tall task for the Vikings to come out and be victors in here, and I understand they're -3 favorites in this. I'm just a little bit worried, but my gut is telling me that I think I like the Vikings here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick them as the winners of this game. I think they get the job done. I think it's going to be a tighter contest, mainly because, again, secondary, not necessarily the greatest over there in Minnesota. They get a ton of turnovers, but they let teams move the ball a lot. And if they don't get those turnovers, then it's going to be problematic. Mike White, really good at protecting the football last week, and there's a feeling in me that they make this game close, and this is one we sweat out. And my final score for this one, I'm feeling something along the lines of like 28-27 Minnesota. A tight one that you're sweating out to the very end, somewhere within that 3-point range. I think this is going to be a very close one here. Next game we're looking at is going to be the Commanders and Giants, as the Giants are home underdogs at +2.5. Currently in a weird spot, kind of a skid here, I would say, as the Commanders, on the other hand, are hot as can be. And I've got to say this. I am really worried about the Giants being like that team that starts off hot and then kind of trails off at the end there of the season. I feel like there's always a team that does that, and I'm a little worried that the Giants might be in that boat right now, especially with the fact that they're looked at as home underdogs this week. The Commanders' defense has been lights out as of late, and it is a top 10 unit, without a doubt. Statistically, when you look at the numbers, they have been lights out. They have allowed no more than 21 points a game in their last 5 games, and that was against the Philadelphia Eagles that they managed to thwart and take down in a game nobody expected them to win, and when they kind of really announced their coming out party that we are here. I am going to go ahead and pick the Commanders for this one here, and the biggest reason why for me is obviously, again, their defense been doing a really good job keeping people out of the end zone or just putting up points in general, but also because of how good the Commanders have been against the run this year. They are the 8th best team in the league, allowing only 108 yards per game, whereas the Giants' backbone of their offense is their ground game. They average 151 yards a game. Everything goes through Saquon Barkley in that running game. With some injuries and going up against the Commanders' front seven that has been very effective at stopping the run, I think the Commanders get the W here. I don't expect it to be a super high-scoring affair because the Commanders' offense has kind of been, while it's fun watching Heinicke, slightly inconsistent, but they do a good job. Some weeks they're scoring 30 points, other weeks they're scoring like 20 points. There's no like middle ground with this team here, but I do think it's not a super high-scoring affair. I like the Commanders getting the win 20-17. Tighter contest, but I think that they're able to slow down that run game and do enough to come away with a victory and what is shockingly not an upset because they are the road overdogs, I guess you should say. Is that what Kevin Hart says in that commercial? Overdogs, whatever that may be. Next game we're looking at here is the Titans and the Eagles, an A.J. Brown kind of revenge game. Now, for this one here, the biggest thing that stands out to me when I'm looking at these two teams is just points scored in total. 27.5 points a game are what the Eagles average per. Whereas when you look at the Titans, they're sitting at only 19 a game. That's not necessarily already boding too well in the Titans' favor. On top of that, they are not the greatest when it comes to passing the football. And this is a team that shuts down the pass altogether with the Philadelphia Eagles. They are second best in the league, allowing only 183 yards a game. And with Philadelphia being such a ground-heavy team, you think, all right, well, Titans, really good run defense team, one of the best in the league when it comes to slowing the run. Well, they are a double-edged sword on offense. They are able to get you through the ground, but they can go through the air if they need to. The thing is that they just technically, they don't really need to too often because they're such a good running team. They just bulldoze over teams in their multiple ways that they can. Even if they can't run the football too well, Jalen Hurts has been playing really well. He's had a few 300-yard games where he's looked excellent as well throwing the football. And I just think that the Philadelphia Eagles can beat you in so many different ways. They are such a hard team to stop. Only the Commanders have figured it out so far. Colts are pretty close, but even then you have a bad game here and there, but you still come away with a victory. I don't know if the Titans are going to be able to come out victors in this one, especially it being in Philadelphia. So I am going to go ahead and take the Eagles in this game here. They're -5 favorites, and I do think that they win by about a score or so. And I'm looking at something along the lines of maybe like, and this one I think ends up getting a little bit of a higher scoring affair here. I'm looking at something along the lines of like 31-24. I think they win by roughly about a touchdown and get the job done here. But I do like the Eagles. I just think that their offense is so good and they're able to get it done in so many different ways. It's hard to figure out the best way to stop them because if you're stopping them one way, you're typically leaving things open in another way. And the Eagles are one of those teams that could take advantage of that. Now we're taking a look at the Denver Broncos heading to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, a Broncos team that has just not been able to do a ton on offense, but has had a fantastic defense trying to carry the entire weight and load of this franchise. I will say, after watching Baltimore drop last week's game, I am slightly worried about them. Their offense has been very just up and down as of late, not putting up as many points as you would expect them to be. They average 25 a game, but they struggled putting up those points against the Panthers and even against the Jaguars. Everything was coming really late in the game. You want to see them doing that throughout the entirety of the 4 quarters. And you're going up against the Broncos defense that is one of the best in the league at keeping people from scoring, allowing only 17.6 points a game. They're third best in the league when it comes to that. You being the Baltimore Ravens, you got a tall task. This is a defense that will give you some fits. They're effective against stopping the pass. They're like middle of the road against the run, and I think that's the best route for the Ravens to attack this here. They're 19th in the league against the rushing yards over there in Denver, and being the Baltimore Ravens, you are one of the best rushing attacks in the league with Lamar Jackson and the running back groups that you have over there. Ravens are a massive 8.5 favorite, and interestingly enough, I think this game ends up being a little bit closer, not because I think that Denver is going to be lighting them up and putting up points, but because this defense is so good and just the struggles we've kind of seen from Baltimore the last few weeks, I think Denver might be able to hold them down a little bit in terms of scoring. And while I do like the Ravens to win, I don't know about -8.5. I'm looking at something along the lines of the Ravens winning like 20-13. So I do like Baltimore, and I like them to take the victory in this game here. But 8.5 seems like a lot for a team right now that has, one, been struggling to win in like against teams that are not necessarily, like their game against the Panthers, not a great win. And then again, to lose last week in Jacksonville, it took them so long to get the ball rolling. You now face a Denver defense that's really good. I could see this game being a little bit closer than that 8.5, but I do think the Ravens get it done again, 20-13. Nice victory for them, and a much needed one to kind of pick things back up after stumbling last week. Now, diving into the Deshaun Watson return game, where he gets to return in his former team's hometown of Houston. The Browns are sitting at -7 favorites for this game, and this is one that I think if you were to bet on anything on the spread, this is a game to do so. I think the Browns are going to be able to have their way against a Texans team that can't really do a ton right now. They're not necessarily the worst at defending against the pass, but it's the running game that they really struggle to defend, and that is the Browns' specialty, being one of the best rushing attacks in the league. If they are not just doing that 1-2 punch combo of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb just back and forth, they're doing it wrong. You're going to need a game where Deshaun Watson can come in and kind of knock off Russ and just kind of get back in the groove of things. And so the fact that you're going up against a Houston Texans team that struggles tremendously against the run, this is a perfect opportunity for him to, and especially because he's playing somewhere that used to be his home, so he's kind of comfortable in the area as it is. This is like a prime opportunity bounce back type of game for Deshaun Watson to kind of come back. He can play he just needs to play a solid game, just get back into the groove of things and let the running game kind of do their thing over in Cleveland. I think they win, and I think they win fairly handedly. I like the Browns winning this game 27-13. I don't necessarily think that Houston's going to be able to put up a massive fight in this game. They have just been trending down. And, you know, earlier in the season, I was talking about how they were keeping games closer than they should have, and they were in some instances, but now it kind of feels like the wheels are starting to fall off the wagon a little bit here, and I think the Browns kind of run away with this one. Now we're looking at the Seahawks and the Rams. And this game here, the Rams not going to have Matthew Stafford once again, as he is back in concussion protocol. And I've got to say, I really hope that the Rams just kind of commit to letting Matthew Stafford sit out for the rest of the season. I know he was dealing with some like numbness in his legs and what have you. Whatever that whole situation is, just let him sit out for the rest of the year. You're out of the playoffs at this point. They're like, even if they're not mathematically speaking, I don't really see a route for Los Angeles to be able to push their way into a playoff position at this point in time, especially going up against a Seahawks team that has been pretty good so far this year. They've been stumbling the last few weeks, but offensively, they have been able to explode, and defensively, they have been really good for the last handful of weeks, barring last week, a little bit of a collapse against the Raiders there with that giant loss, one that I don't think anyone really saw coming considering just where the two teams were sitting prior to last week. I do think, though, in this game, the Seahawks kind of run away with it. If you don't have Matthew Stafford starting there in LA, that's only just going to compound a lot of the struggles they've already been having over there, and I think the Seahawks do come away with the victory in this game here. I could see them winning by about 10 or so points, and being -7 favorites, this feels like a pretty good one for the Seahawks to win by more than that. So I do like the Seahawks. Unfortunately, the Rams are where they are right now. It is just a disastrous season to what was a fantastic ending for them last year, obviously ending in a Super Bowl. But I think Seattle comes away with the victory here, and I do think that they're going to end up putting up a decent amount of points. I just feel like it's going to be hard to keep the team motivated over there in LA, and a lot of people are talking about the shine wearing off over there on Sean McVay and whatnot, and while I still think he's a great coach, they are just hurt and so behind the 8 ball right now. It's just going to be tough for them to recover. I like the Seahawks. I think they win 33-20. They're going to win by a decent margin. I think the Rams might find and I think I'm being generous giving 20 points to the Rams, to be honest with you. But I do think that maybe they find the end zone once or twice. The Seahawks defense, while it has been good for a bulk of the season, there have been games where they've allowed more points than they probably should be, and hence where I come up with that score. From 33-20, though, I like the Seahawks. Now we're looking at a game that has a lot of intrigue. Mike McDaniel playing up against his former team. This is one that I think a lot of eyes are going to be on, and this is in that 4 o'clock window as well. Dolphins going to San Francisco. Who is going to come out on top? You have a 49ers team that has a top 5, probably, I would even say top 3 defense right now with the way that they've been playing. They've been stuffing the run. They've been getting after the quarterback. There's been creating a lot of headaches for a lot of offenses. Then you have a Dolphins team with a head coach who used to be there, who knows what that team is all about. He was there for a while working under Kyle Shanahan. There is a lot of intrigue in this game because if there's someone who can figure out a way to kind of expose the defense he's going up against over there in San Fran, it's got to be Mike McDaniel, right? So, interestingly enough, 49ers, despite being 7-4, they are home, so maybe that's where this number's coming from, are -4 favorites. I like the Dolphins in this game, though. The Dolphins' offense has just been so explosive with Tua, with Jalen Waddle, with Tyreek Hill doing their thing week in and week out. And I know that this is going to be one of the best defenses they've played this season. Arguably, it might end up being the best defense they play all year long just because of how good San Francisco has been this entire season, especially when they're healthy. It's an unbelievable unit. But I just think that if somebody can figure out a way to take down this defense, it has to be Mike McDaniel. And on top of that, and call me a hater if you want, I don't really understand why. It's no hate. It's just I feel like we've seen it enough. I don't really know if I can buy into Jimmy Garoppolo being this guy who's going to lead the 49ers on this crazy push. People talk about his win-loss record and say what you want about it. Sure, it's there. I get it. But the 49ers have fielded some of the best defenses in the league for pretty much the entire time that Jimmy Garoppolo has been the starting quarterback over there in San Francisco, and is a large reason for a lot of that success. This 49ers defense will suffocate just about anybody in the league, but I think the Dolphins, with Mike McDaniel being their head coach and knowing this team, has a real shot of winning. I think it's a lower scoring affair. I don't expect a ton of points. I have the Dolphins winning 23-17. They get a tight win, not too wide of a margin, 6-point victory, but I like the Dolphins with an upset victory. So if you're betting the spread, Dolphins +4 feels pretty good to me. Now we're looking at another big game. AFC seeding implications on the line here. We have the Kansas City Chiefs at 9-2, visiting the Cincinnati Bengals that are 7-4. Bengals, home underdogs, +2 underdogs to be exact. This is one that I also find very interesting because Cincinnati beat Kansas City twice last year and somehow are coming into this game at home as underdogs. And I know last year was last year, but the Bengals, having a really tough start to the season, have really started to figure it out. The possibility of Ja'Marr Chase coming back this week is also something as well to look at and keep an eye on. I'm really feeling good about Cincinnati in this game, and I feel like it's an upset brewing. On top of that, when it comes to just how these two teams play, the biggest weakness for the Chiefs defensively is defending the pass. They're 21st in the league in terms of yards allowed, where when you look at the Bengals, they are one of the premier passing teams in the league, even without Ja'Marr Chase in the fold. If Ja'Marr Chase is playing, and even if it's a slightly limited role, because maybe he's like 90% and they have him playing the game, for example, even if he's playing a little more decoy than he is actually number one wide receiver, you have to respect his ability. It's going to open things up for the rest of this offense. You have the 4th best passing attack in the league in Cincinnati. Joe Burrow is on the rise and already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's definitely within that top 8 argument without a doubt. I feel an upset happening here. It's in Cincinnati. I can't believe they're considered underdogs, but I'm going to take the Bengals here. I think this is one of those games that does get a little higher scoring. I could see a decent amount of points here, and I'm looking for a big score on this one. I'm thinking something along the lines of 31-28 Cincinnati. So over under at 53. I think I like the over for this one, and I think the Bengals come away with a massive upset. So Cincinnati +2, I like it. Book it for a W, Cincinnati. Next, we're going to look at the Chargers and the Raiders in Las Vegas, a divisional matchup between two teams that are still fighting for a playoff spot. Yes, Raiders, believe it or not, at 4-7, still in the thick of things. I'm not really too sure about this game. There's a lot of variables that can go into this one, and even it seems like Vegas is not too sure about this one, as it is a pick'em game. Even split on the spread here. Money line is 110 for both teams. Over-unders at 50.5, so expected to be one of those higher scoring affairs, and I could definitely see that happening considering both teams rank near the bottom in the league in terms of points per game allowed, and they're also two teams that are closer to the top half of the league than they are the bottom half of the league in terms of points per game scored on both sides. This is going to be one that winds up being a higher scoring kind of shootout type of game, and one that I think could, with an over-under set at 50.5, probably skyrocket past like 60, honestly. And it's really going to just come down to who could protect the football better, but also one big question I have is, can the Chargers avoid letting the Raiders run wild on them? The Raiders, when they run the ball and really feed Josh Jacobs, can be very effective on the ground. And we saw that last week. Josh Jacobs taking that run 86 yards to the house in OT. Big play there, and he is a big play opportunity kind of guy. Really earning his big contract he's going to be getting at the end of this season without a doubt. Now, Chargers, they're allowing 151 yards a game on the ground, and that is going to be something that I know for a fact the Raiders have to be game planning around and have to be preparing themselves for. If the Raiders can take advantage of that, they can definitely make this game interesting. I am, however, going to go with the Chargers here, mainly because I just believe in that offense a little bit more than I do the Raiders here. I will say that in terms of just overall, the Raiders have had some bad luck. They've also just had some really poor outings, whereas the Chargers right now, they're dealing with injuries on defense that do have me a little concerned, but have overcome them in some capacity to be at least 6-5 right now. They're in a better spot than the Raiders are. And when I just look at like better quarterback, give me the Chargers, group of wide receivers like the Chargers, and that's definitely a comparable group because you have Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow versus Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Hopefully they're both healthy enough to be able to play, because that has been something that has also given the Chargers some issues. But if all goes well, I do feel like the Chargers come away with the win. And I'm looking at something like 33-31. High scoring affair, not a ton of defense. One of those games that probably comes down to, who has the ball last at the end of regulation, something like that. But I do think the Chargers can squeak out a victory if all falls in their favor and they're able to be healthy enough going into this game here. Now we're looking at the Cowboys and the Colts, and I've got to say, I don't really have a ton of hope for the Colts in this game here. The biggest thing for me is just the Colts offensive line is allowing the most sacks in the league at a little over 3.5 sacks per game, going up against a Cowboys team that is the only team in the league averaging 4 sacks a game on defense. And I just don't really have a ton of hope for Indianapolis in Dallas to get the job done. And this is coming from somebody who grew up rooting for the Colts. But they're just, with the way things kind of handled at the end of ended up being handled at, the end of last week's game, and, the timeouts and whatnot, and the situation that they're in just does not really spell too many more victories. I know that they got that big win over the Raiders a couple of weeks ago, but that was a nice little story for what it was. I don't really expect that happening too many more times this year, and I just kind of see the Colts trending south right now, and I don't really see a road to victory for them. And yeah, I'm kind of writing them off a bit, sure, but I think the Cowboys win a pretty ugly game. We're talking like, give me Dallas 30-10, something along those lines. They're minus 10.5 favorites, and I could see that number pushing a lot higher than that, just based off the state of the Indianapolis Colts offense right now, and that defense probably wearing out because of it in this game. And then to cap things off, we have Tom Brady going up against his kryptonite since he's been in Tampa Bay, the New Orleans Saints. One of the very few teams he just seems to have an issue beating. I will say this, that history is telling me that I should probably pick against the Buccaneers and go with the Saints in this one, but this Saints team has been dealing with an injury bug that just does not seem to let them go. And on top of that, they're having turnover issues on offense. Their takeaway differential is minus 14 right now. That is a ludicrous number. That is the worst in the league by a significant margin. And I just don't know if I can really get behind the Saints and what they've been doing right now. Not to sit here and say that Tampa Bay has been some incredible juggernaut on offense, but they at least have Tom Brady, and it's not like he's been playing bad statistically. He's been pretty solid. And I mean, they're the 5th best passing team in the NFL right now in terms of yards per game. It's just that they can't really seem to get anything going on the ground. Well, you're going up against a Saints defense that has been pretty good against the pass, but is not necessarily great against the run. If you can find some semblance of a running game here, you know, just based off of how the Saints lost last week against the 49ers, not being able to put up a single point, if you can just give them some fits offensively, establish a solid ground game, Brady can do the rest. I don't think that this Saints defense is quite as good as it has been in years past. They've been losing pieces every single year because it seems like they're like $100 million over the cap and they keep losing pieces. And while they do try to add, I don't really know if they've been... I don't think if it's necessarily been progression each year for the defense. It kind of feels like they might be tailing off a little bit now. We'll see how that kind of, if that ages well or not, but a little worried about this direction the Saints are heading in right now. It does not look great, but I do think the Buccaneers get the victory here. I believe in Brady, and right now they're, in a spot where you're 5-6, division's kind of on the line. You need to get a victory here, and I just think that right now you're a better team than the Saints, and this is a game that Tampa Bay should be winning, and I do kind of expect them to win. I'm looking at, maybe it's a little bit uglier. You don't see a ton of points, but I do think they get the job done. I like the Buccaneers 23-20, so expect the Saints to maybe move the football a little bit more effectively than they did last week, but I do think that the Buccaneers get the job done here. But those are my picks for all 15 games this week. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below, so let me know. I appreciate you guys for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon and some Thursday Night Football tonight. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.